Okay, picture this. You're out there watching an eclipse start. That first little nick out of the sun or the moon, where does it begin? Is it like from the top, the side, the bottom right?
It feels like a tiny detail, maybe, but it's crucial for really seeing it happen accurately in your mind's eye beforehand.
Exactly. And think about a total lunar eclipse. Does the moon just go black? Or does it turn into that kind of spooky reddish color we hear about?
The famous blood moon.
Yeah. Predicting isn't just about when it happens, is it? It's the whole visual experience.
Yeah.
Where the shadow starts, how it moves across, even the colors.
And that's something Aryabhata was clearly focused on, not just the math, the timing, but also describing what you'd actually witness.
It's fascinating. He pairs these precise mathematical predictions with these really detailed visual observations.
It suggests he was aiming for, a complete picture, not just abstract numbers, but a prediction of the lived experience of seeing an eclipse.
Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Last time, we really got into the weeds, didn't we? The amazing math in Aryabhata's Golapāda for calculating eclipse duration and magnitude.
Yeah, figuring out the start, the end, how much of the sun or moon gets covered. Incredibly sophisticated geometry.
So today, we're shifting focus a bit. We're looking at the visual side. How did Aryabhata predict what an eclipse would actually look like, standing right where you are?
And what other visual details did he think were important enough to include? Things like color, orientation.
Exactly. It's about seeing the eclipse through ancient eyes, using his framework. We'll be digging into verses 45 through 48 of the Gola chapter.
It really rounds out his treatment of eclipses, moving beyond just the timing and extent to the actual appearance. It shows a desire to answer not just when and how much, but also what will I see?
Right, because knowing the start time is one thing, but knowing where on the sun's edge that first shadow appears, that's another level.
And that's where this concept of Valana comes in. V-A-L-A-N-A.
Valana. It sounds technical, but think of it like the angle of the bite.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. When the moon starts crossing the sun, or Earth's shadow starts crossing the moon, at what point on the edge does it hit first?
12 o'clock. 3 o'clock. 7:30.
Precisely. And that angle, the Valana, it's not fixed. It actually changes.
Changes based on what? Where you are.
That's a big part of it, yeah, your location on Earth. And also the specific positions of the sun, moon, and Earth at that exact moment.
It makes sense. Your viewpoint matters. How do you translate this huge cosmic event onto, your little patch of sky?
That's the challenge Valana solves. It's the mathematical bridge between the celestial geometry and what you, the observer, perceive locally.
And getting Valana right is key to drawing what Aryabhata called the Grahaparilekha. Can you spell that?
Sure. Grahaparilekha. Basically an eclipse diagram.
Okay. Verse 45 mentions this directly. Let me read the translation.
Go ahead.
The latitude deflection, Akṣavalana, and the seasonal ecliptic deflection, Ayanavalana, are calculated thus at the time of observed eclipse. By this method, the drawing, darshanam, of the eclipse diagram, Grahaparilekha, is accomplished.
So, you see, he explicitly links calculating these two deflections to being able to draw the eclipse.
Right. Two components making up the total Valana. Let's break them down. First is Akṣavalana.
Akṣavalana, A-K-S-H-A-V-A-L-A-N-A, latitude deflection.
Okay, latitude. So where you are north or south on the globe, how does that affect the eclipse angle?
Well, think about, straight up for you, your zenith. That direction changes depending on your latitude, right?
Yeah, up is different in London than it is on the equator.
Exactly. And your local North Point is also slightly different relative to the true celestial North Pole, and importantly, the pole of the ecliptic.
The ecliptic, that's the sun's path through the sky.
The plane of Earth's orbit, essentially, which looks like the sun's path to us. It has its own pole perpendicular to that plane. Akṣavalana accounts for the angular difference between your local vertical north reference frame and the reference frame defined by the ecliptic pole.
Huh. It's like adjusting for your personal tilted perspective on the universe.
That's a great way to think about it. Aryabhata realized the observer's location fundamentally changes how they see the orientation of things in the sky. It's not just an abstract model, it's tied to your viewpoint.
Okay, that's Akṣavalana. What's the second part? Ayanavalana.
Ayanavalana, A-Y-A-N-A-V-A-N-A. This one is about the season, or more accurately, the eclipse's position along the ecliptic path.
So where in its yearly cycle the sun is when the eclipse happens?
Exactly. Specifically, its position relative to the solstices, the longest and shortest days. And it also factors in the tilt of the ecliptic itself.
That 23.5 degree tilt that gives us seasons.
Right. Because of that tilt, The geometry between the sun, moon, earth, and your horizon changes depending on whether the eclipse is happening near, say, the summer solstice versus the winter solstice.
So an eclipse in June might look like it starts at a different angle than one in December, even if you're in the same place.
Potentially, yes. The Ayanavalana captures that seasonal or positional effect along the ecliptic. It's about the orientation of the whole system relative to the time of year.
Wow. Okay, so you've got these two factors, Akṣavalana for your latitude and Ayanavalana for the time of year or ecliptic position.
And calculating them wasn't simple arithmetic. It required spherical trigonometry.
Trigonosphere. Yeah, that sounds hard, especially back then.
Definitely.
Yeah.
They were using geometric methods, likely diagrams, and perhaps some early trigonometric tables or rules derived geometrically. No calculators.
But somehow they combined these two values, Akṣavalana and Ayanavalana.
To get the total Valana. And that total Valana is the key number. It tells you the angle of rotation.
Rotation from what?
Usually from a standard direction, like the direction towards the ecliptic pole. It tells you how much that initial contact point is twisted around the edge of the sun or moon, as seen from your location.
So it's the final piece you need to know if that first shadow appears at like the 2 o'clock position or the 8 o'clock position on the disk.
Precisely. Is the bite coming from the upper left? The bottom? Valana answers that. It provides crucial orientation information.
Which, as you said, lets you draw that Grahaparilekha, the eclipse diagram.
Exactly. With Valana, you know the angle. Combined with the calculations for timing and magnitude we discussed last time, you can actually map it out.
What would that diagram show?
It would illustrate the path of the shadow. For a solar eclipse, the moon's shadow crossing the sun. For a lunar eclipse, the moon moving through Earth's shadow.
And it would mark the contact points.
Yes. Crucially, it pinpoints the angles on the limb, the edge where the eclipse begins, where totality or annularity starts and ends, and where the eclipse finally finishes.
So Aryabhata wasn't just giving numbers. He was giving you the tools to essentially draw a preview of the eclipse.
A visual forecast. Imagine being able to sketch what you were about to see in the sky hours or days in advance. Based on these mathematical principles, it's incredibly powerful.
It really bridges the gap between abstract math and actually looking up at the sky.
It makes the prediction tangible, visual, a synthesis of calculation and observation.
Okay, let's shift from geometry to color. Specifically, the colors of a lunar eclipse. Verse 46 gets into this.
Yes, it's quite descriptive, almost poetic.
Let me read this one too. At the beginning and end of the eclipse penumbral phase, the moon becomes smoky, Dhūmra. During the partial eclipse in the umbra, the moon is black. During the total eclipse, it is tawny-brownish, Kapila, becoming dark coppery-red, Sakṛṣṇatāmra, in the middle of the darkness, deep in the umbra.
Such evocative terms, Dhūmra, smoky.
He says that's at the beginning and end, which we now call the penumbral phase, right? When the moon is just in Earth's faint outer shadow.
Exactly. It's not a dramatic darkening, more like a subtle dimming, a grayish veil. The moon loses its usual sharp brilliance.
It takes a keen eye to notice that, I imagine, especially the very beginning.
It really does. It speaks volumes about the quality of observation, probably done under very dark, clear skies. Focused attention.
Then, as the moon moves into the darker part of the shadow, the umbra, he says it becomes black.
Kṛṣṇa, black. This corresponds to the partial phase, where you see a clear, dark bite taken out of the moon. The contrast is much stronger than the penumbra.
That would be pretty obvious, I guess. A chunk of the moon just disappears into darkness.
Right. A clear progression from smoky dimness to stark blackness as it enters the umbra. He's documenting the sequence carefully.
Then comes totality. Sarvagras. When the whole moon is inside the umbra, he calls it Kapila.
Kapila, Kapila, tawny or brownish. Interestingly, he notes this for the total phase, perhaps especially near the edges of the umbra.
So not completely black, even when fully eclipsed.
Apparently not, according to his observation. It suggests some light is still getting through, or maybe reflecting differently. The shadow isn't perfectly uniform.
And then, deep in the middle of totality.
Tamadai. Tamomadhye. In the middle of the darkness.
That's when it becomes Sakṛṣṇatāmra. Dark coppery-red.
Sakṛṣṇatāmra. That's the blood moon. The most striking visual.
So he saw that characteristic red color. Why does it turn red?
Well, that's where modern science comes in. It's because of Earth's atmosphere.
Our atmosphere? How?
Think of sunlight streaming past Earth. Our atmosphere acts like a giant lens, refracting or bending that light slightly into the shadow zone,
Okay.
but it also acts like a filter. Air molecules scatter blue light much more effectively than red light. That's why our sky is blue during the day.
Right, the blue light gets scattered away.
Exactly. So the light that makes it through the atmosphere and gets bent into the Earth's shadow has most of the blue filtered out. What's left is predominantly reddish light.
And that faint reddish light illuminates the moon, even when it's deep inside the shadow.
Precisely, giving it that coppery red or blood red appearance. The exact shade can even change depending on how much dust or cloud is in Earth's atmosphere along the edge at that time.
That is amazing. And Aryabhata described this sequence smoky, black, tawny, then coppery red just by looking, without knowing about atmospheric refraction or light scattering.
It's pure, careful observation. It highlights his commitment to recording what he actually saw, the empirical evidence. He documented the what beautifully, even without the modern why.
It really validates his observational skills, doesn't it? Modern science explains the phenomenon, but he nailed the description centuries earlier.
Absolutely. It shows how crucial good observation is. It often comes first, laying the groundwork for later theoretical understanding.
Okay, moving on slightly. Verse 47. Here, Aryabhata tackles a potential confusion. Why doesn't Earth's shadow ever block the sun from our viewpoint?
Right. It seems like a simple point, but important to clarify.
Let me read it. Earth's shadow does not cover the sun for those on Earth. The wise know this. From the statement of its impossibility, that eclipse happens when the eclipsing body, i.e., the moon, is aligned with the sun.
It's straightforward geometry, really.
Earth's shadow, Ujjaya. It's cast away from the sun, right? Behind us.
Always. We are situated between the sun and the shadow Earth casts, so from here on Earth, we can never see that shadow fall onto the sun.
It's geometrically impossible from our location.
Yeah.
Simple, but he felt the need to state it clearly.
Which is good practice. It prevents misunderstanding, especially when you're talking so much about shadows. He's building a logical, consistent picture.
And he contrasts it directly with solar eclipses. Those happen, he says, when the moon lines up with the sun. Raviya Samai.
Ravinasam. Moon aligned with sun. That clearly distinguishes the two types. Lunar involves Earth's shadow on the moon. Solar involves the moon's shadow on Earth, or the moon blocking the sun from our view.
Different alignments, different phenomena. Got it.
It reinforces the basic setup for each type of eclipse.
Now, the last verse in this section, verse 48, this one seems really practical. It's about how much eclipse you actually need to be able to see it.
Exactly. A visibility threshold. Let's hear.
Okay. An eclipse of 1/8 part magnitude is always not visible on the surface of the Earth, whether it is darkening or brightening the celestial disk.
So if the magnitude grassa is less than 1/8,
1/8 of the sun's or moon's diameter being covered, that's 12.5%.
right. If it's less than that, he's saying you probably won't notice it with the naked eye.
And he says this applies whether it's darkening. Malini Kaisya, like a tiny bite out of the sun.
Maline, Kṛṣṇa. Yes, a very small partial solar eclipse.
Or brightening. Vimalaja, what does that mean?
Vimalaja, probably referring to the very subtle dimming and then brightening as the moon passes through just the penumbra during a lunar eclipse, or maybe a tiny sliver of partial lunar eclipse.
Ah, so those really faint, barely there events. He's saying they fall below the limit of what we can actually perceive visually.
It's a nod to the practical limits of human vision. Your calculations might show a tiny eclipse, but if nobody can actually see it, does it matter for observation?
That's a really interesting point. It connects the math back to the real-world experience of skywatching.
It shows he wasn't just lost in theory, he understood the practicalities. He's considering the observer's actual capabilities.
It's kind of grounding, isn't it? Amidst all this complex geometry, a note about what you can realistically expect to see.
And that idea is still relevant today, isn't it? Astronomers might detect incredibly faint dips in starlight to find exoplanets, but for a public eclipse announcement.
You need something people can actually witness.
Yeah.
A magnitude 0.01 solar eclipse isn't going to make headlines.
Exactly. The concept of a visual significance threshold persists. Aryabhata recognized it long ago.
It's amazing how these threads connect. Thinking about that Valana calculation and the Grahaparilekha.
The eclipse diagram.
You really see that today, don't you?
Yeah.
Modern eclipse maps often have those little diagrams showing the sun or moon with the bite taken out, and they show the angle.
Absolutely. They show the contact points P1, P2, P3, P4 in their orientation. It's the same fundamental goal. Visually represent the event for the observer. We have more sophisticated tools, computer graphics.
But the core idea of showing the orientation, the angle of the bite, is directly descended from what Aryabhata was doing with Valana.
It's a clear lineage, providing a visual prediction based on calculation.
And the color descriptions, too. Verse 46, even without the why, his what was so spot on.
It's a perfect example of observational science paving the way. He laid down the detailed empirical data. Later science provided the explanation, atmospheric effects.
It really underscores the value of just looking carefully and recording what you see.
That's often how science progresses, isn't it?
Mhm.
Observation first, then theory catches up or refines the understanding. His work was a vital step.
And even that visibility limit, verse 48, we still think about eclipse magnitude in terms of practical visibility and public interest.
A tiny penumbral dip might be technically an eclipse, but it won't draw crowds like a deep partial or total eclipse. Significance matters, practically speaking.
It brings in the human element, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What can we perceive? What's meaningful to our experience?
Aryabhata seems to have understood that balance between theoretical completeness and observational reality.
So wrapping up this part of our journey, we've seen how Aryabhata didn't just stop at timing. He dug into the visual appearance.
Through Valana, Akṣavalana, and Ayanavalana, leading to the Grahaparilekha diagram.
We looked at his incredible descriptions of lunar eclipse colors, smoky, black, tawny, coppery-red, and how modern science explains them.
And his logical clarification about Earth's shadow not eclipsing the sun from our perspective.
Plus that practical note on the visibility threshold needing about an 1/8 magnitude to really see it.
It paints a picture of a truly comprehensive approach to eclipses, blending math, observation, logic, and practical considerations.
It feels like we've really covered his whole system for eclipses now, from the math of duration and magnitude to the visuals we just discussed.
It's a remarkable achievement within the Golapāda, showcasing the height of ancient Indian astronomy, a fusion of geometry and keen observation.
A true scientific milestone.
Absolutely. It laid such important groundwork.
Okay, so that concludes our deep dive into Aryabhata's specific eclipse calculations and descriptions in the Golapāda.
A major section of the text dealt with in incredible detail by him.
But we're not quite done with the Golapāda yet. There's one final exploration left.
The concluding verses.
Exactly. Next time, we'll look at Aryabhata's closing thoughts. He reflects on where his knowledge came from.
The mix of tradition and his own intellectual effort, perhaps?
Seems like it. And also the importance he placed on preserving this knowledge for the future.
A sort of philosophical capstone to this intensely scientific work.
Yeah, it promises to be a really thought-provoking look at the mind behind the mathematics, a reflection on knowledge itself.
Looking beyond the calculations to the man and his motivations sounds fascinating.
I hope you'll join us for that final deep dive into Aryabhata's Golapāda.